Kia ora koutou and welcome to this video where I'm going to rank the corporations in Terraforming Mars. Now the thing with these ranking videos is they are entirely subjective. They're based on our experience playing it, and our experience playing the game could be very different to your experience playing the game. So to give you some context, I'm going to describe the meta that I tend to play in. And the different metas you play in dramatically change what corporations are more effective and when. So here are some of the features about how we play Terraforming Mars. First of all, we play with all of the expansions except Turmoil. Now the reason we omit Turmoil is not because it's not good, it's because it adds an extra amount of playtime to the game, and that tends to take it over the normal window of opportunity we have to play a game on a weeknight. We also tend to play with 4 players, sometimes 5. So some corporations that might shine a lot at 2-player don't really get a lot of table time with us. It's 4 or 5 players. Our table is also very heavy on ground game and terraforming the planet. We don't stuff about building big engines, we tend to go for the quick wins where we can. So a 5-player game very rarely goes over 7 or 8 generations, and a 4-player game will be lucky to reach the 9th generation. And we also do drafting, and especially hate drafting. We do keep an eye out for what our opponents are playing, and sometimes bury cards that they would get a huge advantage from. And finally, we alternate between the 3 different boards, so specific milestones and specific goals we won't really talk about much in this video because they're very situational. They'll only appear in one of 3 games that you play, because we'll start off on the main board and then we'll move to Hellas and so on, and then just cycle around them. So with that out of the way and you've got a good idea of how our group plays, which is pretty fast and furious, focusing on the board and just getting stuff down there and getting quick wins and quick scores, let's get on to the rankings. And a reminder that 3-Minute Board Games does not do paid content. If you want to see more stuff like this, come support us on Patreon. Now I'm going to run through these alphabetically, sort of. There's a couple of corporations that aren't on this tier list thingy that I found, so we're going to slip them in at the end. So we're going to start off with Aphrodite. So Aphrodite is a weird one to start off with, and I don't think it's particularly good. It's got this hodgepodge of Venus and grass tags. It's got good starting money at 42, and starting plant production isn't bad, but that extra 2 money every time Venus is terraformed, quite frequently in games we play, Venus barely gets touched. Aphrodite to me is a corporation between 2 identities, and it doesn't really do either of them very good. And this for me is going to go straight on to the D tier. Aphrodite, not particularly great. Like any of these corporations you can win with if you play well, it's just Aphrodite doesn't give you a huge amount of levers at the start of the game to really get you pumping. Next up, we have the Arcadian Communities, and their cool thing is they're allowed to claim territory on the board, and when they place something on the board, they get some money back. They also start with a prodigious amount of resources, so 40 money and 10 steel. That's essentially 60 resources they can spend on things, and there's a lot of building tags in the game, so you will spend that 10 steel. You can reserve a territory each turn, and effectively that's going to give you 21, 24 extra credits over the course of the game. So all up, Arcadian's giving you something in the ballpark of 80 credits, plus whatever you get from placement bonuses from putting down those tiles in very juicy spots. I think Arcadian Communities is pretty damn strong. I'm not sure if they're S tier, but I'm definitely going to put them up in the A tier. I think they're a very strong corporation, especially if you have a ground-focused group and a high terraforming group. They're really good at just locking off those cool areas and preventing people from building alongside your greenery, which is great. You can place down cities at the end of the game and score a bunch of points. Next up we have Arador, who starts with 40 money and the ability to place down an extra colony, which is kind of cool, but not exactly game-breaking. What makes them really neat for me is they get an extra money production, every time they place a new tag. Now that might not seem like much, but in your first hand you can easily pick up 4 or 5 different tags on otherwise useful cards. And what it's doing is it's adding 1 production to each of those useful cards. Things like Mine, which is 4 cost, building tag, 1 steel production. That becomes 1 steel and 1 money production if that's your first building tag. This means you really want to put down a bunch of diverse, weird, eclectic resources early in the game, but those get you income. And I think Arador is very strong. The ability to easily get to 5 or 6 production in your first couple of turns, good starting money as well, and just a very strong corporation that you can end up with a lot of money coming in. And a lot of those low-cost cards with tags are really good building blocks for other engines later on as well. So where do we rank them? I think I'm going to put them in the A area, and I'm going to put them just below Arcadian Communities. So I'm also going to rank within each category which one I think is better. So we'll get like a total ranking from top to bottom. Next up we have Arclight that starts with 45 money and 2 money production, as well as a animal tag. And every time you play a plant or an animal tag, you put a token on your corporation card, and every 2 of those is worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. Now, Arclight is a little bit of a trap in some respects, because you look at it and you might go, oh, I need to obsess on plants and I need to obsess on animals. That's not really how they play in my experience. With 45 money and 2 income, they're just good at any engine, and any plants and any animals you pick up are gravy. And that gravy can add up to an extra 6 or 10 extra victory points through the course of the game. I think Arclight's a really solid corporation. They're not fancy, but they're not weak either. You can do any kind of engine you want with them, and just look at those animal and plant tags as extra points at the end of the game. And if you just do your normal thing and just pick up those cards, it's an extra bunch of points as the game goes through. So I'm going to put them solidly in the B category. I don't think they're quite good enough to be an A tier corp, but they're not weak. They're very middle of the pack. I have had a couple of stunning games with them though, where I've got a animal points as well, 20, 30 odd animal points through the course of the game. That's good fun. Next up we have Celestic, who starts with a Venus tag, 42 money, and dives through the deck to find the first 2 floater cards they can find. Their ability allows them to put a floater on any floater card, and they get victory points for having floaters on their own corporate card. Now, the Venus corporations in general aren't particularly good, and floater engines can be a bit sketchy. This one really depends on what you turn over on those first couple of flops. If you get a good combination of floater cards and you can do some funky stuff with them and take that extra floater action, Celestic can be pretty respectable. If you get some trash you can't play until the middle of the game, less good. But I think of the Venus corporations that focus on Venus tags and floaters and stuff, Celestic's probably the best, because you're guaranteed to get 2 of those floater cards, and hopefully there's good interaction there. Hopefully you can play them, and hopefully they can play off each other. So I don't think they're stonkingly strong. I think they're probably B tier. That might be generous. I'll put them below Arclight because I don't think they're as good as Arclight, but I don't think they're bad enough to go in the C category. There are some other Venus corporations I will put lower than Celestic. Next up we have Shuing, Xing, Mars, and I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly, and if I've offended anyone, I am deeply sorry. They start with 43 money, 3 income, building tag, and a 2 credit discount on any subsequent building tags. They are really solid, dependable corporation. They're not flashy, but you've got good income to start with, you've got good money to start with, and there are a lot of building tags. So you're going to get that discount a lot during the game. If I was teaching this game and the beginner corporations didn't exist, this would be one of the corporations I would give to a new player, because they're robust. They're not dramatic in any particular way, but you can build really solid, big, chunky engines with them. I'm going to put them in the B tier, and I think I'm going to put them just above Arclight. I think they're really the median point for corporations in this game. There are better corporations, there are worse corporations, but they are a solid, dependable middle ground. Yeah, really enjoy playing them, and as I say, you get a lot of return from those building tag discounts. Next up we have Ecoline, who start with 36 money, a plant tag, 3 plants and 2 plant production, and have the special ability to be able to turn 7 plants into 8 to claim a greenery. And that later ability might sound good, but really that's like a bonus plant placement after like 7 turns effectively. It's not as good as it initially looks. And the problem with them is they've got not a lot of resources at the start of the game, and all you've got is greenery. So when we started playing the game, Ecoline was one of the most popular corporations, because people were like, oh yeah, I can put down heaps of greenery, that's great. Lots of points there. But you put down lots of greenery as Ecoline, and other people put down cities beside you. They're not particularly strong, and they're very one-dimensional. And they can also be just blocked out with random tiles. You put down a bunch of greens, someone puts down a crater beside you. There's not much you can do about that. So I'm going to put Ecoline in C. They're not fantastic. They're very, very one-dimensional. They don't have great starting resources, but you know, plants and placements do get you points. So they're not terrible, they're just very much a one-dimensional ground game focused corporation. Next up we have Criticore, who start with 57 money, and that's basically it. Oh, and a discount of 4 on anything they play that originally cost over 20 before you factor in discounts. That includes standard projects like cities and greenery. Criticore are just monstrously good. There's so many good cards and so many good effects that cost more than 20 in the game. Like, so many good things. And it also makes you get really picky with your card selection because you're wanting to play these big bad 20 cards. So you're not hoarding like dozens of small use cards. Criticore is good in any situation. There's very few times you play Criticore and you go, I'm not effective, I don't have anything I can do. Really strong corporation. I'm going to put them in the S tier. That ability to get those discounts, that great starting money, they are just a powerhouse. And if you manage to get the standard projects card down, you're getting a 7-point discount on greeneries and cities at the end of the game, and that can be absolutely decisive as you just go bang, bang, bam, and put down lots and lots of point scoring. They're also really good for a Jovian engine as well, because a lot of the Jovian cards cost over 20, and Jovian engines can score you a lot of points as well. So Criticore, really strong corporation, absolutely S tier. Now, if I was in a tournament and given the opportunity to pick any corporation to play and then just be randomly dealt cards, I would probably go with Criticore as my first opportunity. I think they're very, very strong and they don't really have any situational weaknesses. People could try and bury a lot of 20 cards from you, but you know, there's always standard projects. There's always something you can do with them. Next up we have Factorum, who starts with 37 money and a steel production and a weird ability that allows them to dig through the deck to find building tags or allows them to get back power production if they don't have any. Now, the intent behind that is that they can zero their power production and then just get it back up and play more buildings. So play more cities, play more things that generate other resources by expending power. But I found with colonies, you really want to keep 3 power. You really want to be able to take advantage of those colony ships, trading fleets, and zeroing down to 1 power for this bonus it just doesn't do it for me. I'm sure they're really effective, and I'm sure there's someone out there who thinks, yeah, they're super powerful because you can dig through and you can just bump back up. But for me, they seem slow. They've played slow in the past when I've given them a go. I'm going to put them in the D tier. I think that's where they kind of belong. Someone tell me why they're way better than that. I really want to know, because for me, pretty uninspiring from my experience. And speaking of uninspiring, it's Helion. They start with 42 money, 3 heat production, and the ability to turn heat into money. Now that originally seems like a super strong thing, and you're like, wow, cool. At the end of the game, when the heat's all up, I can redivert all that back into money. The problem is, like at the start when you're first playing, that seems really cool. But then you figure out that the exchange rates on heat production versus the exchange rates on money production cards, heat is always less effective. So yeah, while you can get some extra revenue at the end of the game if the heat track's gone up, a lot of the time you probably would have been better investing that money into money generating cards to start with. So Helion for me is a one-dimensional corporation that leads you down a path that is not necessarily that effective. So I don't think they're broken or bad or terrible or awful, but they definitely belong in the C tier, and I'm going to put them below Ecoline. I think they're not great, and yeah, the heat thing is a bit of a trap, and I think it can lure people in. You build all this heat production stuff thinking it's going to pay off late game, and it doesn't pay off quite as much as you hoped. Next up is Interplanetary Cinematics, who start with 30 money, 20 steel, and they get back 2 credits every time they play an event card. I originally didn't rate Interplanetary Cinematics. They were one of the first corporations when we were playing. I just looked at it and was like, yeah, it's kind of dull. But you sit there and think they've actually got 70 resources to start with. Now that 30 money and 20 steel, that's 70 resources. That's a lot. And there are a lot of good events in the game. Like a lot of corporations, they are dependent on what you draw, but there are a lot of good building tags, and they're very common in the deck. So spending that 20 steel, that's going to happen. And it really is about taking that 70 money you get at the start of the game and turning it into an engine almost immediately. And also in our meta, because things are really tight, a lot of events get played. People will just fire down them asteroids to get the terraforming track up because they know the game is going to be over quick. So Interplanetary Cinematics leans into that. And I'm going to put them up in the A tier. I think they're probably in between those two. I think they're a very strong corporation and leans into our playstyle, which is quite aggressive. So great at getting an engine built, and the event thing just keeps paying itself off throughout the game. Next up, we have Inventories, who start with a science tag, 45 money, draw 3 cards on their first turn, and they can play around a little bit with the global modifiers. So if something requires a temperature of -10, they can play that card when it's -14. Same for oceans, and same for the oxygen level in Venus. I think Inventrix is probably a lot better in a smaller game because in our games, those terraforming things go past pretty damn quick. So being able to get 1 or 2 points ahead, not so dramatic. It means you might be able to get out penguins a little bit earlier or one of those big ocean cards, but we rapidly terraform in our game, so that bonus isn't particularly fantastic. 45 money and 3 cards on a science tag. I mean, if you get lucky with science tags and you draw some cool stuff, that's great, but overall, Inventrix is a mid-tier sort of corporation. I'm just going to put them behind Helion and TSC. They're not bad, they're not great. Yeah, if you get lucky with science tags and get some good stuff in there, they can do wonderful things, but that's very much dependent on what you draw. And just that starting extra science tag isn't really that much to incentivize them down that track. Next up, we have Lakefront, who start with 54 money, which is one of the best in the game, and they increase their money production every time an ocean is placed, and they get a placement bonus of 3 credits per ocean aside instead of a normal 2. And I think Lakefront are really strong. You've got good money, really, really good starting money. That gives you a lot of options. That placement bonus also encourages you to play a ground game and just start raking in those placement bonuses. I've played Lakefront a few times, and I think they're very, very strong. Because if people want to counter what you're doing with the oceans and placing beside them, that drives them into the ground game as well. And they're doing it less effectively than you are. You're getting those extra placement bonuses. They're placing to deny those to you. If you get an easy way to get oceans down, that's extra production. And you can also plan around that. You can plan around getting penguins and other high ocean cards. So really, the strength for Lakefront for me is that extra income, because oceans are going to come down. That's just bonus money you're going to get. A really good set of starting money, and you either get real good bonuses from your ground game, or you force your opponents to make what could potentially be non-optimal decisions in order to counter your placements. For me, that makes them an A-tier corp. I'm going to put them probably just above Interplanetary Cinematics, but below Arcadian Communities. So, pretty respectable. Next up, we have Manutech, who start with 35 money, 1 steel production, and every time they gain a production, they get the equivalent resource as well. So they effectively start with 1 steel. Now, that's not a huge amount of resources, and Manutech's really dependent on that opening hand of what cool resource generating cards you get. But they can be very strong, and money is a resource. So if you play a card that gives you bonus income, it will also give you bonus money that turn. It's essentially an extra turn of using your engine throughout the game. Every time you play something that boosts your engine, you essentially get it back straight away. So despite that pretty ordinary starting income, they can be an absolute economic powerhouse. And I'm going to put Manutech probably at the top of A. I've played a few games of them where they have just got ridiculous amounts of resources coming in, because it can be just big discounts on every card you play. Let's take Mines, basic card. Costs 4, gives you a steel production. Well, you also get a steel, which gives you back 2. You've essentially half-priced that card, discounting its acquisition cost. The same with like basic income generating cards. The one that costs 6 and gives you 2 income, well, that's effectively costing you 4. And that allows you to just cycle through and just start steamrolling and playing more and more cards. You really want to get a lot of resource generating cards, but there's a lot of them in the deck, so it's very hard for you to be hit by hate drafting. Manutech, very strong corporation, deserves to be top of A. Nearly thought about S, but I don't think they're quite that good. The Mining Guild. They start with 2 building tags, 30 money, 5 steel, and a steel production. And every time you place on a production area, you gain 1 steel production. These guys are reasonably good in low player count games. In 4 or 5 player games, those resource areas go just so quickly. You have to either dive into placing cities and greenery really early on in the game to get a benefit from it, which is not necessarily an effective play, or you just have to hope that people don't take them from you. They're really not good in 4 or 5 player games. And I really want to like them because I like the idea of the mining corporation gathering all those resources. But we just find those big games, they just get sucked up real quickly. So I'm going to put the Mining Guild down there. Yeah, just ahead of Aphrodite, but behind Factorum. Not particularly great, just because those things get snuffed up real quick. 2-player game, I think they could be very, very strong, but that is a very different meta from what we play in. Next up, we have Mons Insurance, which is one of the funniest corporations. 48 money, 4 income, and all of your opponents lose 2 income, which is just great. The downside for them is every time someone plays a negative effect card, you have to pay that person out who's been impacted 3 credits. In our meta, that is suicide, because we always use the red below the line abilities that you just get hit with them. And I mean, they're good. I mean, this is a really good corporation, but in a 4 or 5 player game, they can lose a lot of money. So I'm going to put them in probably in the C tier because their starting abilities are really strong, but you just paint a giant target on your head when you play these guys. Everyone's going to just be throwing stuff around, just trying to bankrupt you because they're still pissed off that you reduce their income at the start of the game. That's it. That's all the motivation any player needs is, oh, you reduced my income at the start of the game. Screw you. I'm going to go out of my way to make your life miserable. So, yeah, strong corporation, strong starting abilities, but just a hate magnet like no other corporation. So, I'm going to put them in C. I'll put them at the top of C because I think they are actually really good and quite strong, but it's a challenge to play them, especially in a group that's quite confrontational. Next up we have MSI, which starts with a good 50 credits, and you turn over the deck and get the first 3 Venus cards, and then they have the most probably pointless ability in the game. Terraforming things on Venus can be done plus or minus 2 steps, so it's like the Inventories ability, but only for Venus, and it's pretty useless. If you get lucky, you can get some good stuff on those 3 Venus draws, but it's pretty unreliable. I think floater cards in general are better than the Venus tag cards, and I think MSI you can just frequently end up with requires 6 Venus, 10 Venus, and 12 Venus cards from those starting 3, and you're sitting there going, well, there's not a lot I can do right now. I'm going to put them in the bottom end of the C tier. You can get lucky with them. You can get some good combinations with Venus tags. But overall, I found them pretty disappointing every time I've played. I've just pulled over a bunch of guff that I've been able to get down in turns 4 and 5 and 6. And it hasn't necessarily delivered as much as I want. The 50 credits that they start with is the prime reason why they're not a D. Valaris is one of the weirdest corporations in the game. They start with 47 money and a greenery on the table. But their special ability takes a little bit of explaining. Let me read it straight from the card. Each new adjacency between your tile and an opponent's tile gives you a standard resource of your choice. So you want to put stuff down by your opponents, and each time you do that, you get extra resources. Titanium or more plants. This is pretty strong. Like, they're a pretty strong corporation. They start the ground game. Your opponents might decide to build away from you, so you don't get that advantage, but I found they can get a lot of resources in the late game and can have some really, really strong last couple of turns where they're placing stuff, they're using that resources to play other things to get them more placements, and they can just go blah in the last few turns. I'm going to put them in A tier. I'm going to put them just behind Arcadian Communities and maybe just behind Lakefront. So Arcadian, Lakefront, and Valaris are in my A tier, and they're all area controlling corporations. Because again, that's our meta. That's our table presence is a pretty big deal for us, and they're 3 that dominate on table presence. Actually, I'm going to put them in front of Lakefront, just because they're that much more annoying and hard to counter than Lakefront. Oh, Phoblob. Phoblob starts with, I believe, the second lowest amount of money, which is 23 credits and 10 titanium. Their titanium is also worth 4 instead of the standard 3. So you've got 40 resources of titanium there, 63 resources to start, and they are entirely dependent on what you draw in that first hand. You need big Jovian cards and big events and stuff to really make them worthwhile. If you draw like 4 or 5 space tag cards in your first hand, including some production, you're sorted with Phoblob. If you don't, you will get hate drafted into the ground. I like them because throwing asteroids around is a lot of fun, and Phoblob does it as well as anyone, but I don't necessarily think they're that particularly effective. I'm going to put them in the middle of the C tier, really dependent on that first turn's hand and what cool cards you can get. And also with 23, you're really limited on the number of cards you can keep. So you're going to want a bunch of space cards, and you're going to want to be able to play them with your very first hand. Get that production down, and then hopefully do something from there. Next up, we have Point Luna that starts with an Earth tag and a Space tag, 37 money, 1 titanium production, and the ability that every time they play a Earth tag, they get to draw a card. And that is a fantastic ability. They're the only corporation that really starts with an innate card drawing ability, and drawing more cards in Terraforming Mars is always a good thing. Point Luna simply is a dependable corporation that's got a slight lean into space stuff, but you really want to be getting those Earth tags and a bunch of other things as well. So you can do any kind of engine you want with them, but you've got that card draw up your sleeve. And that, for me, is a very strong ability, and I have had thunderously good games of Point Luna. I'm going to put them in the S tier behind Criticore. I think they're that good. The card draw, like, it's just such a great natural bonus, and there's really good Earth tags. Earth tags in general are a really solid tag, and going into space is also a good thing. So space and Earth tags, great tags to go after, and innate card draw. What more can you say? Point Luna, yeah, S tier. I could possibly put them at the top of A tier, but I think I'm just going to put them at S tier there. I think that's where they belong. Now we have one of the most maligned corporations in the game, Polythemos. They start with 50 money, 5 income, and 5 titanium, but all the cards they purchase cost 5. And that really puts people off. I actually really like them. I think that starting 5 income and 50 money, that is a wealth of riches. Like Critical, they're encouraging you to not pick up every card you have and to focus on high cost cards. So instead of keeping 2 or 3 cards a turn, you might want to be keeping 1. But you got to remember, you start with that 5 extra income, and it only costs you 2 extra credits to everyone else to keep a card. So you can effectively keep 2 cards and still come out a little ahead. There are also other ways to get card draw, and you're going to want to go after any card drawing cards that you find. Anything that gives you that extra card draw through the game. And even if it's just dropping an ocean on that place that gives you 2 extra cards, you're probably going to want to do that. So while they're daunting, I actually think they're a lot stronger than they initially look. I don't think they're earth-shatteringly strong. I'm going to put them in the B tier, and I'm going to put them just above Celestic. I think they're pretty good, and I've played them before, and I've done quite well with them. Just making yourself focus on exactly what cards do I need to keep. They're not very good at dealing with contingencies, but if you just keep the big cards and just focus on a big card engine, you can get some pretty good results with them. Let's say 50 credits, 5 titanium, and 5 income is the highest amount of money any corporation gets. You've just got to be more discriminating with the cards you pick up and try to get as many free ones as you can. Next up, we have Poseidon E that starts with 45 money and a starting colony and whatever bonus that colony gives you. You also get 1 income because you get +1 income every time a colony is placed. In a 4 or 5 player game, these guys are berserk. Colonies in our meta are used a lot. People like getting to 3 energy pretty quickly and sending off that trade ship and getting those bonuses. We place a lot of colonies during our game, and Poseidon E just gets richer and richer and richer from it. I think even in a meta where players don't extensively use colonies, they're still very strong. good starting resources, and the ability to pick a colony and get that starting bonus means that you can tailor make what you're going to do based on what's in the colony deck and what's in your hand. I'm going to put them in the S tier. I think I'm going to put them just below Credit Core. I think they're that good. I think it's very hard to play Poseidon E bad. The colonies are just so good, and yeah, you really want to get to 3 power as soon as you can, maybe even pick up an extra trade fleet and really go at that space trading thing. But even if you don't, you're just going to pick up bonuses from everyone else doing it. Next we have Price Star, which starts with -2 terraforming score and a whopping 53 income. Now Price Star doesn't like terraforming that much. Any turn you don't terraform, you place a token on here, get a victory point and 6 money. What Price Star does is it encourages you to have big turns. And the way I've seen them played really well is that you spend like 3 turns doing not a huge amount, building up your engine, and then you terraform the crap out on turn 4. Then you hold back again and you wait until the TR tracks are getting close to being finished, and then you do another big turn of terraforming. So you pick up half a dozen or so extra points from that, but you also pick up 36 extra credits. And yeah, it might take you a little bit below on the TR score, but you try to catch up in that turn. So you bank your heat, you bank your plants if you can. Hopefully no one's throwing around too many asteroids and burning your plants. Yeah, you always got to deal with that. Price Star, quite a strong corporation. I think they also encourage good play because, yeah, I'm going to put them in the middle. And I mean by encourage good play is you really focus on your engine and getting that sorted and then dramatically acting. And you just get that extra tick of resources and extra victory points. Really strong corporation. Oh, sorry, I put them in B. I'm going to put them probably bottom of A tier. Yeah, I think I'm going to put them there. Really solid corporation, different play style, and you've got to get used to that cadence of don't act, don't act, don't act, big actions to really get the best out of them. But once you grasp that, which is pretty simple to grasp really, free money, free victory points, what's not to love? Next up we have Robinson Industries, which starts with 47 money, no tags, and the ability to increase its lowest production, if they're tied you can choose, by 1 by spending 4 credits. And I found Robinson really underwhelming. In a game that goes for 8 generations, you're not really going to get much of a return on those investments. The first 3 turns, yeah, sure, you'll get back something from them, but in turns 6, 7, and 8, it's just not worth doing. It's also the fact that it has to be your lowest production that you increase really sucks. If this was increase any production by 1, it would probably be very strong, but it would still be a lot more desirable. You end up with a smattering of 1s and 2s in production at the end of the game, and that's not particularly great. I think Robinson's a pretty poor corporation. I'm going to put them below the Mining Guild. They've got okay starting money, but that special ability is just not particularly good. At least not in our meta. Next up we have the Wacky Recyclotron, and their thing is that they start with a microbe and a building tag, 38 money and a steel production. And their thing is every time you play a building tag, you put a microbe on this card. Every 2 microbes, you increase your plant production by 1. That's actually a pretty cool combo because a lot of building tags get you presence on the board. Increasing your plant production allows you to increase the things around your presence on the board. So Recyclotron, whilst being microbes and building tags, which seems like a weird combination, actually dovetail in quite well, and you can build some pretty damn strong engines with them. It's really easy to play 3 or 4 building tags in your first couple of turns and be getting 2 plant production. That's a pretty good way to start the game. And it's just one of those engines that just keeps giving and giving throughout the course of the game. Very much focused on the ground game, but I think pretty damn solid. I'm going to put Recyclotron in... Let's put them in the top of the B tier. I don't think they're A tier. We might put them just below Arclight, actually. Yeah, right bang in the middle. Respectable engine building corporation. Pretty low starting money, but things just cycle for them and they end up spreading out. Probably a better corporation again in lower player counts, but in 4 or 5 player, respectable. Next up we have Satin Systems, which starts with 42 money, 1 titanium production, a Jovian tag, and increases its production anytime any Jovian tags are played, including your own. Now, Satin is incredibly vulnerable to hate drafting. Like probably the most sabotaged corporation in the game, because Jovian engines can score a crap ton of points. If you get down 7 or 8 Jovian tags and a bunch of things that give you extra points based on that, you can score a lot of points just off those tags, and people do keep an eye out for them. But if you do manage to land a bunch of good scoring Jovian tags, they're really good, and other people playing Jovian cards, which are usually quite strong cards, gives you a boost. I think Satin Systems is probably at the bottom end of the A tier. You can get so many points of them if everything comes together. If you draft luckily, if you pick up cards well, if you get those Jovian tags rolling, they can be astronomically good. But they're just so frail and easy to disrupt with hate drafting. People will pick up a Jovian card, see you sitting next to them and just go, nah, you're not getting that. They will bin it. But not always. And when a good plan comes together, they can generate more points than practically anyone in the game. So, Satin Systems, low A just because of that vulnerability to being messed with. Next up we have Splice, one of those corporations I've never really got my head around. They start with a microbe tag, you turn over cards until you draw the first microbe card, and every time a microbe is played, the person who played the microbe gets an extra microbe on the card or 2 credits, and you get 2 credits. And that's a weird thing. They're one of the few corporations that buffs everyone else. And I'm not sure really what good that is. I mean, encouraging people to use microbes, okay, that's all well and good, but you get a little bit back from it, but it's really situational. And you can see some games where very few microbes get put down, and other games where a lot of them do. I think Splice is probably a C tier corporation. Someone out there, tell me why they're really good. I think, yeah, every time I've played them, there's been a little bit more microbe activity around the board, but it's not been enough to really shake things up. I've got some good points from some microbe action. Starting with ants in your hand is not a bad thing, because you can go out and nom things, but ants is going to generate you, maybe 3 or 4 points by the end of the game. I don't see them. So that's why they're in the C tier. I don't see them as terrible, but I don't really get them. So happy to hear other people's explanation about why Splice should be a total S or an A tier corporation, because, yeah, they're just one I don't get very much. So we'll put them in the middle of the pack. Compromise. Speaking of Jovian tags, we come to Stormcraft, who start with a Jovian tag and 48 money, which is pretty good. They also have the ability to add a floater to any card, but they don't start with any floaters like that other corporation that allows you to draw them. You can spend floaters on this card for 2 heat, but it's not really that big a deal. Stormcraft is a corporation lacking a strong identity. They're not as good at going after Jovian tags as Satin Systems, because they don't get the boost from it. They're not as good as going after floaters as Celestic. I'm really terrible remembering the names of corporations, but they're not as good at going after floaters as Celestic. And that extra heat thing is a not particularly fantastic ability. I'm going to put Stormcraft right down at the bottom. I think even Aphrodite's got more redeeming features than Stormcraft. They're just a corporation without a strong identity. If they started with a floater card, that might be a redeeming feature. They might be able to do something with that. But as it is, aside from the 48 money, they got nothing really going for them. Next up, we have one of the weirder corporations, Terra Labs. They start with a science and an earth tag, which is great, but they only start with 14 money. And they also lose a TR step. And the reason they start with only 14 money is it costs them 1 coin to keep each card. So you might as well start with, your first turn is just going to be keep your 10 cards and maybe discard a couple to play like a 4, 5 or 6 point card. You kind of skip your first turn, but from that point on, you get to keep every card you want. And if you're playing on the main board, that's good for getting that goal, the 16-point milestone. That's cool, but that's only if you're playing on that board. In a 5-player game, especially because they effectively skip that first turn, and it's a shortened game anyway, it's really hard for them to catch up. I have won with them in 4-player. I have not won with them in a 5-player because They've just got that slow start. But they are super flexible, and being able to keep every card you get just opens up a lot of options for you. They also have a neat trick that isn't immediately obvious until you play them the first time, and that is that because you've got this wodging great hand of 20 odd cards at some points, you can take an action on your turn to discard one card and get one credit. And you can keep doing that until everyone else has passed out of the game. Then you can take a series of chained actions if you want to. No corporation, I think, is as good at playing the passing game as Terra Labs can be towards the end of the game. But you're losing that first turn. You're effectively skipping a turn to get those cards because you have no money at the start of the game. I'm going to put them in the C tier. They're potentially better than that in smaller player counts. But for our games that go by so quick, losing that turn is just a crippler. I have one with them, but that required some real tinny luck. I got 4 Jovian cards in my first hand. That's basically the story there. But I didn't play them until later in the game, so I was able to pick up a bunch through drafting. I played like an early card for some production, and that was it. I played it on like turn 2. Yeah, they're okay. They're just a bit different. Next up, we have Taraktal, who start with a wodging 60 money, a Earth tag, and a 3 credit discount on all Earth tags. And they're pretty one-dimensional corporation. Earth tags are great, getting discounts great. 60 starting money just allows you to play some big cards early on in the game and hopefully get your engine rolling with that. It also gives you a lot of flexibility about the number of cards you pick up in that first hand. I think Taraktal are not a flashy corporation, but they're fundamentally a strong corporation. I'm going to put them solidly in the A tier. I think I'm going to put them, just in front of Interplanetary Cinematics, because it's a bit easier for them to use that 60 money than it is for Cinematics to use that 20 steel. Strong corporation, really hard to go wrong with them. 60 starting money just gives you all those options, so respectable. Next up, we have the Tharsis Corporation, which starts with 40 money and a city on the planet, and you get 3 money back every time you place a city and increase your income every time there's a city placed, and that's regardless of who places it. Tharsis are sort of the kings of getting cities down. And in a big game, a lot of cities will end up on the board. The board will get populated quite well by the end of the game. They're not as good as I originally thought. Like Tharsis was originally one of my favorite corporations. Putting down cities, dominating the board, that was great fun. And I'd be looking for ways to get city cards to increase that income. But quite frequently, cities are not an optimal move early in the game. So Tharsis can be a bit of a trap. You can overemphasize placing cities, and they're not necessarily great returns on investment, even with the bonus that Tharsis gets. So I'm going to put them probably in the B tier. I'll put them just below Arclight. I think they're respectable. They're a good corporation, but they can lead you down traps. They can lead you into building cities when that might not necessarily be the best thing for you to be doing right then. You should probably be focusing on your engine and maybe getting cities down later, but Tharsis, you'll just be incentivized to get them down straight away and might not necessarily be the best play. Next up, we have good old boring Thorgate. They are 48 credits, start 1 power production, a power tag, and reduce cost on all power cards by 3. Now, it used to be that people looked at Thorgate like a poor Helion because they couldn't spend like energy as money, and they got this little discount on energy. They were like, and energy production wasn't particularly flash up until colonies. Thorgate has improved dramatically with the inclusion of colonies because it's very easy for them to bump themselves up to that 3 power in order to send their trade fleet off every turn. And they can do that with standard projects if they really want to at the cost of 16 to get up to that 3 power. And they can do that on the first turn. If they've got power cards in hand, they can play them with a discount and they can get those trade fleets going. So Thorgate, if I'd done this a while ago, would have been a C-tier corporation, but I think that early power, that gets them up a bit. I'm going to put them in the top tier of, maybe a little bit below Arclight. Yeah, going to put them up there. respectable corporation, but really that hinges on colonies and being able to get to Power 3 as soon as you can so you can get those trade fleets moving. Next up we have Valley Trust, the most wildly random corporation probably in the game. You start with a science tag and a 2 MC discount on any science cards and 37 money and an extra Prelude card. I forgot to mention at the start of the video, we also play with Prelude, so that's an option. It doesn't really factor into the decisions I'm making here because whatever Prelude cards you get will determine what corp's better for you, and that's incredibly situational and a whole bunch to unpack. But Valley gets an extra one of those, and that can sometimes be amazing. You can get some amazing combos down with your starting 3 Prelude cards. You can also get some guff and be spread too thin. So Valley Trust, I'm going to put them high end of C just because of that randomness. The average value of Prelude cards is pretty good. It's probably around about, I haven't done the calculations, but I'm going to guess about 17 to 22 odd resources, ballpark, for each card. So you are looking at quite a bit of money there. Maybe I'm being hasty with them, putting them in C. I might put them in B. Now I think about it. They do get a lot of resources, but it is a little bit unreliable. And yeah, I'll put them above Thorgate. If you get that great combination of 3 Prelude cards, they're absolute stonkers. But yeah, you've just got to hit and hope that the Prelude deck delivers you exactly what you want, and that's you get that third one after you've made the other 2 decisions and decided what to keep in your hand too. So it can be a real crapshoot. Next up we have Vyron, and Vyron starts with a microbe tag, 48 money, and probably my favorite special ability in the game, and that's the ability to use a blue card, an arrow card, twice in a turn. And there's some really cool stuff you can do with that. Straight off the bat, you can do things like put down an animal card and get 2 victory points a turn off it. Say something like fish. Put down fish, put a victory point on it, and then put another victory point on it. Extra victory point a turn. You get things like the AI, which allows you to draw 2 cards. Draw 4 cards. There's so much cool stuff you can do with Vyron, but it is entirely dependent on what you pick up. If you pick up one of those strong cards that you're like, oh, wish I could do this twice a turn, Vyron allows you to do that, and for me that is a strong ability. I'm going to put them up in the A tier. That's really a personal thing. I've just number of times I've played them where I've got just the right card that I can use twice, and I've just gone, all hail Vyron. This is such a good thing to have. Yeah, it was the AI, drawing 4 cards a turn. Phenomenal. And 48 money gives you a lot of options. No starting tag, so you can go any direction you really want. And just as long as you've got a couple of good blue cards that you can cycle through, you get some really good benefits from them. So, I don't know, maybe I've rated them too high. That's a little bit of a personal, I love these guys kind of rating, but they're a lot of fun if you get that right card. Next up we have Vitor, who start with 45 money and the ability to name an award at the start of the game, which is an odd ability, and it's good. It's a good little bonus, and it gives you a good steer of where you want to go, and you can do that after you've seen your starting card and your prelude card. So, you can usually realize those 5 victory points by the end of the game. The other thing they have is every time you play a point scoring card, you get 3 credits back. And that is a phenomenal ability. It's one that just keeps on delivering. Points cards give you points at the end of the game and give you money at the start of the game. So Vitor has such a strength there. There's so many point cards as well, you can't be hate drafted out of them. There's always going to be an option to play points cards throughout the course of the game. And a lot of them are usually a little overpriced to start with, but you're getting that 3 credits back. You're essentially depricing the cost of the victory points on them, which is phenomenal. Vitor is one of those corporations where I have scored stupid amounts of points with, because you're essentially getting a discount on practically every card you play, and it's a 3 credit discount. I'm going to put Vitor right to the top of the table. They are super strong. I would like to hear someone argue that Vitor isn't one of the strongest corporations in the game. Criticore, maybe I'd put them over in Poseidon E as well, but yeah, I think I'm going to go with Vitor as my number one for the moment. That 3 discount on victory point scoring cards encourages you to get cards that score you points, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. The award bonus is just gravy, and good starting money as well. Next up we have Utopia Invest, which is like a reverse Robinson Industries. You start with 40 money and a steel and a titanium production, but you can take an action to blow up one of your productions and reduce it to gain 4 of that thing. This is much better than Robinson's ability. It's the inverse of it, but it's something you can use right to the end of the game, because that last turn, blowing up a titanium production to get 4 titanium, that's 12 resources. That's a good thing. Or blowing it up to get 4 plants. That could be the extra greenery you need and extra victory points. I think Utopia's not stellar or anything. I think they're a good mid-tier corporation. I'm going to put them, sort of in between Thorgate and Tharsis. I think they're respectable. That ability is really good to get you those crunch resources you need. And you can also do a fast start. Like getting the 12 credits of titanium on your first turn, if you've got a titanium generating resource card in your hand, can sometimes be the better way of going than just saving up for it and doing it next turn. So yeah, Utopia, interesting one, but the ability, unlike Robinson's, is useful right to the end of the game. If anything, it's more useful at the end of the game than it is at the start. Next up, we have one of the most popular corporations out there with people I've played against, and that is the United Nations Mars Initiative. You start with 40 money, an Earth tag, and every time you do a TR increase per generation, you can take this action to increase your TM score by 1. I think they're a trap. I actually don't like them at all. I think forcing yourself to what they do is they tend to lead people down behavioral paths that aren't necessarily the best course of action. If you cannot terraform on your turn when you're playing the United Nations, you feel like you've wasted a turn because you haven't got to use your ability, haven't got that extra TR. So you might go, I'll do a standard project asteroid and throw that down, and you've essentially spent 17 resources to get 2 terraforming score, which is not necessarily the most effective course of action you could have taken. I think they're bad. I'm going to put them in the D tier. And I think I've just seen players get stuck in that trap of having to terraform on a turn where their best option would have been to build their engine more. And that's the United Nations strength, is getting those extra terraforming rating. But again, we play shortest games. If you do your absolute best with them, you will get 7, 8, or 9 extra TR score, which is pretty good. But you would have to have made a bunch of suboptimal decisions during those turns in order to realize those points. So for me, United Nations is a bit of a trap. And that's why I'm putting them down in the D tier, based on our meta. And the last 3 corporations I'm just going to touch on briefly. They're not on this sheet. Well, one of them is, but the reason I haven't scored them should be pretty obvious. And that is Septim Tribus. We don't play very much with Turmoil. They're a Turmoil-specific corporation. They get bonuses for doing stuff in Turmoil. I haven't played them enough to really give them a solid evaluation. So no idea really how they played it. No reflections on how good they are as a corporation. Then we have 2 of the newer ones. So we've got the Pharmacy Inc., Pharmacy Union, and Astrodrill. Pharmacy Union, still haven't played a game with this one. They look weird. Don't really have anything to say about them. Have played with Astrodrill, and my thoughts on Astrodrill are pretty much the same thoughts I've got for Foblog. If you draw well and you get a bunch of good titanium resources, or in their case, asteroids, you can do some cool things with them. If you don't, they're a pretty one-dimensional corporation. So if I was to rate them, I'd rate them with a very similar score to Foblog. So sorry I didn't get around to rating those 2 corporations. One of them is just because that's not in our meta. We just never play with that corp. And the other one's quite new and a little bit weird, and no one's had the courage to really give it a go yet. And that concludes our ranking of the Terraforming Mars corporations based on my personal opinion. And remember, 3-Minute Board Games does not do paid content. Please support us on Patreon if you want to see more videos like this. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon. Ka kite ano. Take care.